The late afternoon sun cast a golden hue across the quiet suburban neighborhood of Maplewood, a place where families left bicycles on lawns without worry, where children's laughter usually echoed down the streets. On that particular Tuesday, however, the air carried something different, an unease that settled over every porch and kitchen table. 8-year-old Emily Carter had not come home from school. Her absence was first noticed when her mother, Sarah, checked the clock and realized the walk that normally took 7 minutes had stretched into 40. Sarah's pulse raced as she dialed the sheriff's office, her voice trembling. "My daughter. She should have been home. She always walks straight here. Please, you have to help me." Within half an hour, patrol cars rolled into the neighborhood, lights cutting through the fading daylight. Among the officers who arrived was Detective Michael Harris, a man in his early 40s with sharp eyes softened by years of witnessing both tragedy and resilience. Harris had built a reputation in the county for his ability to connect with families, to see more than just evidence and suspects. As he walked into the Carter home, the smell of fresh coffee mixed with Sarah's panic. "Mrs. Carter," Harris said gently, his voice calm but direct, "we're going to do everything possible to find Emily. I promise you that." Sarah clutched a photo of her daughter in a pink frame. Emily's wide smile stared back, her missing front tooth reminding Sarah of the innocence that defined her child. Tears blurred her vision. "She never wanders. She knows the way. Someone must have taken her." Those words settled heavy in the room, and Harris knew she might be right. Abductions by strangers were rare but not impossible. His gut twisted. Every minute mattered. Neighbors soon gathered outside, murmuring among themselves, the tension spreading like wildfire. Mothers held their children closer. Fathers glanced suspiciously down the street. A boy on a skateboard stopped abruptly, sensing the weight of the moment. The community felt the crack in its safety. Harris stepped onto the porch, scanning the street. He asked officers to canvass the area, to check the school, nearby parks, and the path Emily normally took. Radios buzzed with reports. No sign of her yet. Back inside, Sarah gripped Harris's sleeve. "Please don't let her become just another case. She's my only child." Harris met her gaze, and though he didn't say it aloud, her plea hit him in a place he rarely revealed. Years ago, he had failed to bring a missing boy back alive, a case that still haunted him. He refused to let that history repeat itself. As the search began, Harris addressed the gathered officers. "We move fast, knock on every door, check every yard. Someone saw something." His voice carried authority, but inside he felt the creeping pressure of time slipping away. The neighborhood streets transformed. Flashlights cut through the dusk. Dogs barked as strangers called Emily's name, and porch lights flickered on one by one. The hum of insects mixed with the sound of anxious footsteps. Every shadow seemed suspicious, every parked car a potential clue. Yet as the first night crept closer, there was still no sign of Emily. Harris stood near the school, the empty swings swaying gently in the evening breeze, creaking as if mocking the silence that had replaced the usual chatter of children. "This is just the beginning," he whispered to himself. He knew this case would test every ounce of his persistence. Somewhere Emily needed him, and he would not stop until he found her. And to you, the viewer, if stories like this keep you at the edge of your seat, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Each story uncovers not just mystery, but the resilience of people who refuse to give up. Stay with us, because what unfolds next will take you deeper into the fear, hope, and determination of this search. The night was only beginning, and with it, the storm that would change Maplewood forever. The morning after Emily's disappearance, Sarah Carter sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped tightly around a cold cup of coffee she hadn't touched. The silence of the house pressed on her from every corner. Emily's backpack still rested by the door where she usually dropped it after school, its straps hanging limply, like a reminder that something essential had been torn away. The scent of strawberry shampoo lingered faintly in the hallway, piercing Sarah's heart with every breath. Detective Harris returned to the house early, his eyes weary from a night spent organizing the search. He found Sarah staring at the backpack. "You should try to rest," he said softly, though he knew it was an impossible request. "I can't," she whispered, her voice cracked from crying. "What if she's cold? What if she's scared and calling for me?" "I can't sleep while she's out there." Harris sat across from her, laying his notepad gently on the table. He spoke in a calm but steady tone. "Sarah, the best thing you can do for Emily is stay strong. We have deputies combing the area, volunteers walking every street, And we're expanding the search perimeter. She is not forgotten, not for a second. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she pressed her palms to her eyes. I feel so helpless. I should have picked her up yesterday. I should have been there. Don't blame yourself, Harris urged. Parents trust their neighborhoods. You couldn't have known. The only person at fault here is whoever took her. And we will find them. Sarah's sister, Amanda, arrived mid-morning with groceries and a blanket draped over her arm. She tried to offer comfort, but her voice trembled too. You need to eat something, Sarah. Please. You won't have the strength to keep going if you don't. I don't care about me, Sarah snapped, though her anger was born of grief more than malice. I just want my daughter back. Amanda set the food on the counter quietly, then pulled a chair beside her sister. She reached for Sarah's hand. She's strong, Sarah. Just like you. She's holding on until she comes home. The phone rang, making Sarah jump. She lunged toward it, breathless. Hello, Emily? The pause on the other end shattered her hope. It was a neighbor asking about posters. Sarah's voice faltered as she gave directions, and when she hung up, she collapsed against the wall, sobbing. Harris watched with a tightening jaw. He had seen this before, the agony of a parent caught between hope and despair, but witnessing it never became easier. In his mind, he replayed the first hours of the case, questioning every decision. Had they overlooked something vital? He forced himself to remain steady for her sake. Outside, the neighborhood showed signs of strain. Yellow ribbons had been tied around mailboxes, and posters with Emily's photograph were being stapled to poles. Groups of volunteers still moved through the streets, their voices calling her name into the crisp morning air. The sight should have been reassuring, but for Sarah, each cry of Emily only magnified the emptiness inside the house. When night returned, Sarah sat by the window, her eyes fixed on the street. Amanda tried coaxing her to bed, but she refused. If she comes back, I want to be the first person she sees, Sarah murmured, clutching Emily's favorite stuffed rabbit to her chest. Harris lingered at the doorway, watching the fragile strength of a mother who refused to let despair consume her entirely. He knew exhaustion could cloud judgment, but he also understood that this fierce, unyielding love might be the very force that kept hope alive. And as Sarah whispered into the quiet room, "Hold on, baby, I'm waiting," the house seemed to echo her plea. The search was far from over, and tomorrow would demand even more from her, from Harris, and from everyone who still believed Emily could be found. By the second day, Maplewood no longer looked like the quiet suburb it had always been. Flyers with Emily's picture were taped to lampposts, stapled to telephone poles, and slipped into the hands of strangers at gas stations. The words "missing child" in bold letters hung over the town like a shadow. Every face seemed touched by the same worry, every household bound by a shared fear. The county sheriff's department transformed the local community center into a headquarters. Folding tables lined the walls covered with maps, radios, and stacks of printed flyers. Volunteers poured through the doors, retirees, teenagers, parents who had never met Sarah before but now felt tied to her through the fragile bond of parenthood. The scent of brewed coffee and marker ink filled the air as people signed in, collected instructions, and asked what more they could do. Detective Harris stood at the front of the room addressing the crowd. His voice carried the calm authority of a man who had led searches before, but his eyes revealed the weight of knowing what was at stake. "We're grateful for each of you," he began. "Emily's family needs us, and time is critical. We'll divide into groups, cover the walking paths, wooded areas, and vacant lots. If you see anything unusual, don't dismiss it. Report it immediately." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. A farmer offered the use of his ATV, while a local mechanic promised to keep volunteers' cars fueled. A group of high school students pledged to distribute flyers in nearby towns, their backpacks already stuffed with copies. Sarah entered quietly, her sister Amanda at her side, and the chatter softened. The crowd turned, their faces full of sympathy. Sarah's eyes were red, her steps unsteady, but she stood tall as if refusing to be swallowed by despair in front of them. Harris gestured for her to speak, but she hesitated. Then, with trembling hands, she clutched Emily's photograph to her chest. "Please," she said, her voice breaking, "don't stop looking for her. She's out there somewhere. She's kind, she's brave, and she's waiting to come home." Her plea carried across the room like a thread, binding every volunteer tighter to the cause. The community responded with applause, not the celebratory kind, but a solemn pledge of solidarity. A woman in her 60s stepped forward, placing a hand on Sarah's arm. "We won't stop, not until she's home." As groups departed with flashlights, whistles, and radios, the town buzzed with movement. The sound of car doors slamming, dogs barking at the sudden commotion, and boots crunching over gravel filled the evening air. Harris joined one team, his notepad tucked into his jacket, his eyes scanning every hedge and alleyway. But even with this surge of unity, problems surfaced quickly. Rumors began to swirl. Whispers about a suspicious man seen days earlier, speculation about strangers in vans, arguments over false sightings. The sheriff's office phone lines jammed with tips, most leading nowhere. Each dead end chipped away at the volunteers' energy, their initial determination wearing thin under the weight of frustration. By late evening, Harris gathered the weary groups back at the center. Maps were smudged with fingerprints, radios crackled with static, and sweat glistened on tired faces. Yet Emily was still missing. "We keep pushing," Harris reminded them, his tone firm. "This is when it matters most. I know you're tired, but we can't afford to slow down. Someone out there knows something. We just have to find it." Sarah sat near the back, listening, clutching Emily's stuffed rabbit. Amanda rubbed her shoulders, whispering that tomorrow would bring new hope. Sarah wanted to believe it, but doubt gnawed at her heart. She stared at the clock on the wall, watching the seconds slip by, and whispered under her breath, "Hold on, baby, just hold on." Outside, the night deepened, the searchlights sweeping across empty fields. Despite the exhaustion, the town pressed forward, unwilling to let fear silence their fight. And yet, beneath the unity, an unspoken question lingered in every mind. How long could hope survive if answers didn't come soon? On the third morning, tension weighed heavily over Maplewood. The town's determination hadn't faded, but exhaustion was beginning to show. Harris sat in his unmarked car outside the sheriff's office, staring at the thin stack of reports gathered overnight. Most were useless, neighbors mistaking teenagers for strangers, people recalling events too vague to matter. But one report caught his eye. A silver van spotted near the elementary school the afternoon Emily disappeared. He wasted no time. By noon, deputies tracked down the van parked behind a strip of small businesses near the highway. Its paint was dull, its back window cracked, the kind of vehicle that made people uneasy even without suspicion attached to it. Harris's pulse quickened. "This could be it," he muttered, stepping out of the car. Sarah, who had insisted on staying close to the investigation, was waiting nearby with Amanda. When she saw the van, her breath caught. "Michael, do you think—" Her voice quivered between dread and desperate hope. "We'll check it thoroughly," Harris assured her, though his own chest tightened. He signaled for the deputies. Gloves on, they opened the back doors. The hinges groaned, revealing boxes stacked carelessly and a scattering of empty soda cans. Harris climbed inside, combing through the clutter. No child's belongings. No signs of Emily. "Check the registration," Harris ordered. Minutes later, the information came back. The van belonged to a delivery driver who serviced several local stores. The man himself appeared soon after, confusion on his face as he approached the group of officers circling his vehicle. "What's going on?" "That's my van." Harris studied him carefully, noting the sweat on his brow and the twitch in his hands. "We're investigating the disappearance of a child. Witnesses saw a van like yours near the school. We need answers." The man raised his palms quickly. "I was making deliveries. I've got receipts, logs you can check with the store managers. Please, I'd never—" His voice cracked, not with guilt, but with fear of being wrongly accused. Deputies confirmed his route, contacting stores that verified his presence at the exact time Emily vanished. The evidence cleared him. Harris stepped back, frustration gnawing at his gut. Another lead gone. Another hour lost. Sarah's face crumpled. She had clung to that van, to the possibility that it would finally bring her closer to her daughter. Now, as the truth dissolved, her knees nearly buckled. Amanda caught her, wrapping her arms around her as Sarah whispered, "Why does it keep leading nowhere? Why can't we find her?" Harris clenched his fists, his own disappointment buried beneath the mask of professionalism. But inside, the same questions burned. Each false lead drained resources, sapped morale, and deepened the community's fear. He knew too well that time was the enemy. Back at the community center, he faced the volunteers. "The van was a dead end," he admitted, his voice steady despite the frustration clawing at him. "But this doesn't mean we stop. We go back over the details. Someone out there saw more than they realize. We can't let frustration blind us." Whispers filled the room, some angry, some disheartened. A young father slammed his hand on the table. We're chasing ghosts while she's out there with someone who could hurt her. Harris met his glare calmly. I know the feeling, I know it's hard, but we can't let panic dictate this search. One solid clue is worth more than 100 rushed guesses. Outside, Sarah leaned against the brick wall, staring at the ground. The evening breeze brushed her hair across her face, but she didn't notice. Amanda held her hand tightly. It's not over, Sarah. Don't lose hope. Sarah nodded faintly, though her eyes remained distant. Hope was still alive, but thinner now, stretched fragile over the void of uncertainty. And Harris, standing at the edge of the crowd, silently promised himself he would find a way forward, even if every step so far had led only to dead ends. The sun had barely risen when Detective Harris stood outside the sheriff's office, exhaustion etched into his features. Days had passed, each lead dissolving into frustration. He knew the longer Emily remained missing, the slimmer their chances became. Yet giving up wasn't an option. He needed something different, a fresh angle that could cut through the haze of false tips and wasted hours. That morning, it arrived in the form of Officer Rachel Torres and her canine partner, Ranger. Torres, in her mid-30s, carried herself with quiet confidence. Her uniform looked as crisp as her posture, but it was the German shepherd at her side that immediately drew attention. Ranger moved with controlled energy, his amber eyes alert, ears flicking at every sound. His presence radiated purpose, the kind that came only from years of disciplined training. As Torres introduced herself, Harris extended his hand. "Detective Harris, I'm glad you could come. We're running out of time." She shook his hand firmly. "I read the case file on the drive over. Ranger and I are ready. He's one of our best trackers, and he won't quit once he's on a scent." Sarah, who had come to the station with Amanda, looked at the dog with a fragile glimmer of hope. "Do you think he can really find her, even after days?" Torres crouched beside Ranger, running her hand over his coat. "Dogs like him can detect scents most of us can't even imagine. If Emily's trail is still out there, Ranger will find it." The words settled into Sarah's heart like a spark in the darkness. She reached out timidly, and Ranger sniffed her hand, his tail giving a small, steady wag. For the first time in days, Sarah allowed herself a faint smile. Harris led them into a side room, where Emily's belongings had been carefully collected. He handed Torres a small plastic bag containing the child's sweater. This was in her laundry basket. Her scent should still be strong. Torres nodded, her movements methodical. She opened the bag and let Ranger press his nose inside. The dog inhaled deeply, then looked up, muscles tensing with focus. His quiet whine told Torres he was ready. "Good boy," she murmured, clipping his lead securely. "He's locked on." Sarah watched with trembling hands pressed to her chest. "Please," she whispered, "please let this work." Harris placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "This could be the break we need." Yet deep down he knew nothing was guaranteed. Still, the sight of Ranger, poised and determined, ignited a fragile confidence he hadn't felt in days. Torres explained as they prepared to head out. "We'll start near Emily's school, retrace the route she usually takes home. If the trail leads somewhere unexpected, we'll follow it as far as Ranger can go." Harris nodded. "We'll assign deputies to shadow you. If Ranger picks up something solid, we need to move fast." The group left the sheriff's office together, the cool morning air carrying a hint of dew. Ranger pulled gently on his lead, already eager to begin. Sarah followed at a distance with Amanda, her eyes fixed on the dog, as if her daughter's fate rested in his paws. As they reached the school grounds, silence fell. The playground, usually alive with children, stood empty, swings swaying softly in the breeze. Sarah felt her knees weaken at the sight, remembering Emily's laughter echoing there only days before. Ranger lowered his head, sniffing along the sidewalk, weaving back and forth with precise intent. Torres moved with practiced patience, reading his signals, her voice calm and steady. "He's working. Give him space." Harris watched every movement, his chest tight with anticipation. This was no ordinary search. It was their first real chance to pierce the fog of uncertainty. And as Ranger paused, ears sharp, nose pressed to the ground, a ripple of tension spread through the group. Whatever he had found was about to shift the search in a new direction. The morning breeze carried the faint scent of cut grass as Ranger lowered his nose to the pavement outside Maplewood Elementary. His body stiffened, muscles rippling with concentration. Torres gave a slight tug on the lead, but otherwise let him guide. "He's working," she said quietly, her tone steady but alert. Detective Harris stood nearby, his eyes locked on the dog. The crowd of volunteers kept their distance, their whispers hushed, as if afraid to break the fragile moment. Sarah clutched Emily's photograph, her knuckles white, Amanda standing firmly beside her. Every breath seemed to hang on Ranger's next move. The dog began to pull forward, weaving with precision along the sidewalk Emily usually took. His paws tapped against the concrete in rhythmic strides. Torres followed smoothly, giving him space, her gaze sharp on his signals. Sarah's voice trembled as she whispered, "He's following her, isn't he?" Torres glanced back with measured confidence. "Yes, he's locked on to her scent. This is her trail." Harris exhaled slowly. At last they were moving towards something tangible. The group followed as Ranger led them through familiar streets, past tidy lawns with white fences, past parked bicycles left from the day before. Neighbors peeked from windows, some stepping outside, hope flickering in their eyes as they realized the search had taken a new direction. Ranger's pace quickened when he reached an intersection. He paused briefly, nose sweeping left and right, before pulling decisively toward the outskirts of town. Harris noted the shift immediately. "He's onto something. Stay close." They walked for blocks, the suburban neatness fading into more industrial edges, older warehouses, cracked sidewalks, the hum of distant traffic. The further Ranger led them, the heavier Sarah's chest felt. Emily had never ventured this far on her own. "Why would she come this way?" Sarah murmured, her voice breaking. Amanda squeezed her hand gently. Torres answered, her eyes never leaving Ranger. "She didn't choose it. Someone brought her here." The words struck Sarah like a blade, but they carried a cruel logic she couldn't deny. Ranger slowed near a rusted chain-link fence, sniffing along the bottom where weeds pushed through. He circled once, twice, then barked sharply, pulling Torres toward a narrow path leading to an abandoned railroad line. The air smelled of oil and damp wood, the kind of place no child would wander willingly. Harris's heart thudded as he took in the scene. "This doesn't look good," he muttered under his breath. Sarah's breath hitched, panic rising in her chest. "Is she here? Michael, tell me, did they bring her here?" Harris placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "It means she passed through. Ranger's telling us where she went. That's progress, Sarah. We're closer." The group followed the path until they reached the shell of an old station. The building loomed, covered in graffiti, its windows shattered, the roof sagging. Ranger sniffed vigorously at the steps, whining, tail stiff. His body vibrated with urgency. Torres crouched, speaking softly to her partner. "Easy, boy. You're doing great." She looked up at Harris. "The trail ends here, for now." Harris scanned the area. Broken bottles glittered in the dirt. Trash rustled in the breeze. His jaw tightened. If Emily was here, there has to be something left behind. Sarah stood frozen, staring at the building as dread filled her. She could almost hear her daughter's laughter echoing in the empty structure, a ghost of what should have been. Amanda wrapped an arm around her, whispering reassurance, though her own eyes betrayed fear. Harris knew the trail's end was not defeat. It was a signpost. Somewhere within the abandoned station lay the next clue, waiting to be uncovered. And as Ranger's low growl carried across the silence, every heart in that group braced for what they might discover inside. The abandoned station loomed like a relic from another era. Its brick walls cracked, ivy crawling up its sides. Rusted tracks stretched into silence, no longer carrying trains, only whispers of forgotten journeys. The group stood at its threshold, unease pressing on them like a heavy fog. Sarah clutched Emily's stuffed rabbit so tightly her fingers ached, unwilling to release the fragile comfort it gave her. Ranger sniffed eagerly at the broken steps, tail rigid, pulling Torres toward the entrance. The dog's alert energy sent a ripple of anticipation through the group. Harris exchanged a look with Torres before stepping inside, flashlight beam cutting across the darkness. Dust floated in the stale air, disturbed only by their movements. "Careful," Harris warned, voice low. "This place isn't safe structurally. Stay close." Torres moved beside him, Ranger guiding them deeper. Sarah remained outside with Amanda, but every sound from inside made her heart lurch. She couldn't see, but her imagination painted dreadful pictures. Emily's small voice crying in that empty space, her footsteps echoing in fear. Amanda gripped her hand, whispering, "They'll find something." They have to. Inside, Harris's light revealed graffiti scrawled across peeling walls, discarded beer bottles and the remnants of old train schedules pinned with rusty nails. Ranger tugged toward a corner where a bench sat broken. its wooden slats rotting. His nose pressed against the wood and he whined, pawing at the ground. Torres crouched, scanning the area. Something pale caught her eye, snagged on a nail protruding from the bench. She reached carefully, pulling free a scrap of fabric. The pink cloth was frayed, edges torn, but unmistakable. Harris took it, holding it under his light. His throat tightened. "It's from a jacket," Torres confirmed, her voice hushed. Harris turned it over in his hands, remembering Sarah's description of Emily's favorite pink jacket with embroidered flowers on the sleeve. His stomach sank. This could be hers. Torres nodded, watching Ranger sniff the cloth intently, barking once, sharp and insistent. The sound echoed through the hollow station, raising goosebumps on Harris's arms. They re-emerged into the daylight, and Sarah's eyes immediately latched onto the fabric. "What is that? Tell me." Harris hesitated, but he couldn't soften the truth. He held it out. "We found this inside. It looks like part of a jacket. Does it belong to Emily?" Sarah's breath hitched as her hand touched the fabric. Tears streamed down her cheeks as recognition struck. "Yes, it's hers. She wore it that morning." Her knees buckled and Amanda caught her, pulling her close as Sarah sobbed into her sister's shoulder. Harris crouched beside her, speaking with quiet determination. "This means she was here. She left a trail. She's alive, Sarah. She's moving, and we're following." Sarah's sobs slowed, though despair still clung to her. "Then why isn't she here now? Why can't you find her?" "We will," Harris said firmly, locking eyes with her. "This is proof she was here, and that means we're on the right track." The volunteers nearby whispered anxiously, the discovery fueling both fear and determination. Some murmured about the kind of person who would bring a child to such a place. Others swore they'd stay out searching all night if needed. Torres stroked Ranger's head, her voice low but steady. "He's still restless. He wants to keep going. Wherever Emily went next, he's ready to lead us there." Sarah wiped her tears, gripping the rabbit tighter. Hope and dread warred within her chest, but she refused to let despair win. "Then don't stop. Please don't stop." Harris rose, pocketing the fabric carefully as evidence. His jaw tightened, resolve sharpening. The abandoned station had given them a fragment of truth. Now it demanded they push further, no matter where the trail led. And as Ranger barked once more, tugging toward the tracks, the group braced for the next chapter of the chase, knowing each step pulled them deeper into the unknown. The scrap of Emily's jacket had shifted the investigation into sharper focus. It was proof, tangible and undeniable, but it also raised darker questions. Who had brought her to the station, and why there? Back at the sheriff's office, Harris gathered the detectives in the briefing room. The walls were plastered with maps and photographs, the air heavy with the stale scent of burnt coffee. He tapped the pink fabric laid out on the table. "We know Emily was there. Someone took her off her usual path and led her to the abandoned station. That's deliberate. This wasn't random." Detective Wallace, a younger officer with sharp instincts, leaned forward. "We've had similar reports in surrounding counties. Kids approached near schools, attempts that didn't escalate. Different towns, same method. Could be connected." Harris's eyes narrowed. "Pull the files. I want every case within a 100-mile radius that even resembles this. If we're dealing with a pattern, we need to see it clearly." The team worked quickly, shuffling papers, pinning notes to the wall. By afternoon, a chilling picture began to emerge. Over the past 2 years, there had been at least 4 attempted abductions within neighboring states: Indiana, Illinois, and Ohio. In each case, a child had been followed near a school or bus stop. 2 managed to escape. 1 attempt was interrupted by a passerby, and another ended with the child never found. Sarah sat in the corner of the room, allowed in only because Harris understood her refusal to be left out. Her face paled as she listened, clutching Emily's stuffed rabbit tightly. "You're saying this person has done it before?" Harris hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "It's possible. If it's the same individual, he's escalating. He learns from each attempt, gets bolder." Amanda put an arm around her sister. "That means he knows what he's doing, Michael. Doesn't that make him harder to stop?" "It makes him predictable," Harris replied firmly, though inside he felt the knot of fear tightening. "Patterns give us leverage. If we understand his habits, we can anticipate his moves." Torres, who had been reviewing Ranger's search logs, spoke up. "The station wasn't chosen at random. It's secluded, forgotten, but still close enough to town. That's his style. Places where he can hold control without drawing attention. If we cross-reference the failed attempts, I bet we'll see the same type of locations." Harris nodded. Vacant areas, transitional zones. He thrives on the margins where people don't usually look. He circled the map with his pen, marking each site. The similarities were unmistakable. For Sarah, the discussion was agony. Each new detail painted a clearer picture of the man who had taken her daughter, and it terrified her. "What if he doesn't let her go?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Harris crouched beside her, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Sarah, he didn't cover his tracks well enough. He left us her jacket. He's made mistakes, and we're going to use them against him. Don't lose faith." She nodded faintly, though tears blurred her vision. Amanda squeezed her hand, grounding her against the rising tide of panic. As evening approached, the detectives pinned the last report to the board. A composite sketch from one of the earlier cases stared back at them. An indistinct face, features vague, but chilling nonetheless. A man with a cap, average build, unremarkable clothes, someone who could vanish in plain sight. Harris studied it with a simmering determination. This isn't just about Emily anymore. This man has haunted towns for years. He thinks no one can stop him. He's wrong. Silence filled the room, heavy and charged. Outside, the sky deepened into shades of grey, a storm brewing on the horizon. The search was no longer just a race against time. It had become a battle of wits against a predator who had perfected his methods. And as the wind rattled the windows, Harris swore to himself, this trail would not end like the others. Not this time. Detective Harris sat alone in his office, the dim glow of the desk lamp casting shadows across the cluttered papers. The composite sketch stared back at him from the wall, its indistinct face gnawing at his mind. He rubbed his temples, exhaustion threatening to overtake him. Despite the progress, doubt gnawed at his chest. He had promised Sarah they would bring Emily home, but what if this case ended like the one years ago, the boy whose face still haunted his dreams? He heard a knock on the door. It was Torres, Ranger at her side. "You've barely eaten," she said, crossing her arms. "If you burn out, you're no good to her." "I don't have time to think about food," Harris muttered, not looking up. Torres sat down across from him, her eyes sharp but not unkind. "I know what this feels like. Every handler has had searches that don't end the way we want. But you can't drag the weight of the past into this one. Emily needs you focused, not haunted." Harris finally met her gaze. "You don't understand. Years ago, a boy vanished. We searched for weeks, and I swore I'd find him. I didn't. His mother looked at me the same way Sarah does, like I was the last thread of hope, and I failed her." His voice cracked, frustration and guilt spilling out. Torres leaned forward. "That's exactly why you can't let go now. Use it. Don't let Emily become another ghost in your head." Meanwhile, across town, Sarah sat on her porch, staring blankly at the streetlight flickering outside. Amanda brought her a cup of tea, but Sarah only shook her head. "I can't stop hearing her voice," she whispered. "In my mind, she's calling me, but I can't reach her. What kind of mother lets this happen?" Amanda knelt beside her. "You didn't let this happen. You've done everything, every flyer, every interview, every prayer. Sarah, you are not to blame." "But I should have been there," Sarah insisted, her voice trembling. "She trusted me to keep her safe." Amanda pulled her into a firm embrace. "And you're still fighting for her. Don't confuse fear with failure. Emily needs to feel your strength, even from wherever she is." Back at the sheriff's office, the weight pressed not only on Harris, but on the entire team. Wallace slammed a folder shut in frustration. "We're chasing shadows. Too many false tips, not enough time." Harris steadied his tone, though his insides churned. "We can't afford to spiral. Every dead end teaches us something. Where not to look, what to rule out. That narrows the field." But inside, he doubted his own words. He felt the crushing responsibility of holding Sarah's trust, of carrying the entire town's hope on his shoulders. Later, Torres walked Ranger around the parking lot, the cool night air brushing her face. She whispered to the dog as if confessing her own fears. "They all look to us like we're the miracle workers. But what if we miss something? What if his trail fades before we find her?" Ranger pressed against her leg, steady, unshaken, as if reminding her that his instincts would not falter, even if hers did. In the silence of the night, every player in this unfolding tragedy wrestled with their own demons. Sarah with her guilt, Amanda with the burden of holding her sister together, Torres with her doubts, and Harris with the ghosts of his past. And yet, beneath the storm of fear and regret, a stubborn ember of determination burned in each of them. It was fragile but unyielding. The refusal to give in, the belief that Emily could still be found. Harris stared once more at the sketch, his fists clenched. "Not this time," he whispered to himself. "I won't let this one slip away." The night grew colder, but the fire inside him only burned hotter. The morning was quiet, the kind of silence that felt wrong. Clouds hung low, thick and unmoving, casting a dull grey light across the town. Inside the sheriff's office, Harris stood in front of the map, arms crossed, eyes scanning the red pins scattered across counties. His mind spun through timelines, possible routes, behavioral patterns, until a sudden knock broke the stillness. Wallace stepped in, a spark in his eyes that hadn't been there in days. "We might have something." A sanitation worker came in just now. Said he saw something strange yesterday near the old warehouse district off Route 17. Didn't think much of it until he recognized Emily's face on a flyer this morning. Harris was already moving. What did he see? "An open door on one of the condemned buildings," Wallace replied, grabbing his coat. "He said he heard a noise inside, like movement. Thought it was animals. But it's not the first time that building's come up. It's near the train line Ranger followed." That caught Harris's attention. "Call Torres. Get Ranger ready. We're checking it now." Within the hour, the team was outside the warehouse, its corrugated metal siding rusted and peeling. The air smelled of oil and rain-soaked dust. Ranger barked once as Torres opened the back of the SUV, tail stiff, nose twitching. "Let's go, boy," she said, clipping his lead and following Harris toward the entrance. The door creaked as they pushed it open. Inside, light filtered through broken windows, casting slanted beams across the cracked concrete floor. Ranger pulled forward immediately, nose low, zigzagging with urgent precision. "Something's here," Torres muttered. Harris scanned the room. Dust coated everything, but near the far wall he saw smudges, footprints, uneven and shallow. Beside a broken pallet, a small crumpled wrapper caught his eye. He picked it up slowly. A candy brand Sarah had mentioned Emily loved. He called back, "We've got something." Torres knelt beside Ranger as he began pawing at a corner of the room. Behind a stack of wooden crates, she found something more chilling. A child's drawing torn at the edge, marked with faint crayon lines. A stick figure in pink with yellow hair. Next to it, a larger figure, all in black. Torres held it up carefully. She was here, there's no doubt. Sarah arrived minutes later, unable to stay away after Harris called. She stared at the drawing, hand over her mouth. "That's her. She draws herself like that. And that's her son, always with 5 rays. Amanda steadied her. She was alive. She left this. Sarah's tears came fast, but this time they weren't from despair. She was trying to say something, that she's not alone. Harris nodded. "This is communication, a child's way of asking for help." Torres stood slowly, her voice quiet. "He brought her here, maybe kept her here, but not anymore." "Then where did he go?" Wallace asked. "We're close, I can feel it." They canvassed the area, knocking on doors of nearby truck depots and storage units. Most were empty, but one manager remembered something. A man in a grey hoodie seen late at night a few days ago, walking with a child who looked scared. "He walked toward the back road," the man said. "Didn't look right, but it's not my business, you know." Harris leaned in. "It is now. Show me exactly where." They traced the route to a small gravel path leading into a wooded strip, parallel to the tracks. Ranger sniffed at the dirt, ears perking, tail stiffening. He barked twice and began to pull. Torres met Harris's eyes. "He's found a fresh trail." And just like that, everything shifted again, from analysis and waiting to pursuit. The breakthrough wasn't just the evidence they had found. It was the renewed certainty that Emily was still out there and that she had left clues for someone to follow. And now they finally were. The trees pressed in around them, their trunks tall and silent, branches swaying in the late afternoon wind. Ranger moved with urgency down the gravel path, nose to the ground, his lead tight in Torres's hand. Behind them, Harris walked briskly, eyes sharp, mind racing. Every step forward was another second closer or further from Emily. Torres kept her voice low. "He's locked in. The scent's strong." Harris nodded, scanning the brush for signs of movement. The narrow road led toward an old maintenance yard, long abandoned. Beyond that, nothing but woods for miles. Radio static crackled in Harris's ear. Wallace's voice came through. "We got a call. A gas station clerk on Route 9 saw a man matching the sketch just 30 minutes ago. Said he was with a little girl who looked scared and dirty. They left on foot when she asked to use the bathroom." Harris's pulse surged. "Send the location. We're close." Torres's eyes narrowed. That's 2 miles from here. If he's on foot, we might catch him. They moved faster, cutting through the edge of the wooded strip. Ranger barked, tail high, pulling left toward a narrow clearing. Torres followed, her grip firm but responsive. The path opened near a drainage ditch. On the other side, fresh footprints pressed into the damp soil, adult-sized, next to smaller ones. Harris knelt beside them, his breath shallow. It's her. She's still with him. For a moment no one spoke. The weight of the moment pressed down on them, hope mixed with dread. They pushed forward, terrain growing rougher, the trees thicker. Ranger darted ahead, then paused, ears perked. A rustling sound echoed from beyond a ridge. Harris raised a hand, signaling silence. They crept closer. Torres whispered, "Could be them." As they reached the top of the ridge, they spotted movement. A figure crossing a service road, a child trailing behind. The man looked over his shoulder. Even from a distance, his posture screamed awareness. He knew someone was coming. "Freeze!" Harris shouted, breaking into a sprint. The man turned and ran, dragging the girl by the arm. Emily stumbled but stayed upright, her legs moving instinctively. "Emily!" Torres called out. The man disappeared into the trees, the girl vanishing with him. Harris ran harder than he had in years, breath burning his lungs, adrenaline drowning the fatigue. Branches scraped his arms, but he didn't stop. Torres released Ranger, and the dog bolted ahead, weaving through the underbrush like a missile. "Go, Ranger! Find her!" The chase twisted through dense woods, the ground uneven and slick. Twice Harris nearly fell, but he kept his eyes locked on flashes of movement ahead. Suddenly, Ranger barked violently, followed by a shout. Harris pushed through the last wall of thorns and saw the man stumble over a fallen log. Emily dropped to the ground beside him, her arms covering her head. Torres reached her first, kneeling beside the girl. "You're safe now. We've got you." The man scrambled to his feet, but Harris closed the distance fast. "Don't move." He raised his weapon, but the man stopped cold, breathing hard, eyes darting. "I didn't hurt her," he muttered. "I didn't touch her. Down. Now." The man dropped to his knees, hands raised, his chest heaving with panicked gasps. Deputies arrived moments later, cuffing him and pulling him to his feet. Emily clung to Torres, too shaken to speak. Her face was streaked with dirt, her clothes rumpled, but her eyes, those wide, tear-filled eyes, locked on Sarah as she arrived, breathless and shaking. Sarah dropped to her knees, arms outstretched. "Emily," but before they could reunite, medics stepped in, guiding the child away for a full checkup. Harris watched as mother and daughter were held apart by necessity, knowing the hardest part was over, but not yet the end. And though the stranger had been caught, questions still lingered. Why had he taken her? Where had he meant to go next? They weren't finished. Not yet. The suspect sat hunched in the interrogation room, sweat soaking the collar of his faded sweatshirt. His hands, cuffed tightly, trembled just enough to betray the panic bubbling beneath his surface calm. Harris stood behind the one-way glass, watching. He hadn't said a word since they brought the man in. He was waiting, measuring. Wallace entered quietly, holding a folder. "We ran his prints. Name's Calvin Reese, mid-40s. 2 prior arrests, both for trespassing and petty theft. Nothing violent on record." "No record doesn't mean no history," Harris muttered. "He's careful, controlled, just like the others." Torres stepped beside them, arms crossed. "Emily's not speaking yet. She's eating, she's safe, but she's shaken bad. That man kept her silent somehow. Maybe threats, maybe isolation, but she's afraid." Harris clenched his jaw. "He's not a drifter. He planned this. Moved through multiple towns, stayed off-grid. We need to know where he kept her and if there are more victims." Inside the room, Calvin shifted in his seat, eyes darting to the door. When Harris finally entered, the silence broke like glass. "I didn't hurt her," Calvin said instantly. "She's fine. I made sure she was fine." "You kidnapped an 8-year-old girl," Harris said coldly. "Oh, you don't get points for feeding her." Calvin leaned forward, his voice cracking. "I just wanted company. I wasn't going to do anything bad." Harris didn't flinch. "You took a child from her family. You hid her in abandoned buildings. You made her draw pictures because she had no voice left to use." Calvin flinched at that. "She liked drawing." Harris dropped a folder on the table. "Where else have you been? What other kids have you followed?" Calvin's gaze dropped to the table. "There weren't others. Not like this. We've got your van on camera in Indiana, Ohio, a failed attempt in Illinois, Kids who were lucky enough to run. We have names. Do you want us to add more? Calvin looked up, his eyes hollow. I never laid a hand on them. You ran, Harris replied sharply. From every scene, you lured them. You stalked them. That's not innocence. Calvin exhaled shakily, the defiance draining from his posture. The cabin, he muttered. She was there for 2 nights. Then the warehouse. I didn't know what to do next. I was scared. Harris leaned in. Where is the cabin? Northwest, off County Road 83, behind the old orchard. No one goes there anymore? Outside the room, Torres relayed the location to deputies. Wallace had already dispatched a unit. Sarah, waiting in the lobby, stood as Harris approached. Her eyes searched his face. What did he say? He admitted to taking her. He's talking, Harris said. We're verifying everything now. He mentioned a cabin where he kept her. If there's anything left behind, anything that can explain what happened, we'll find it. Tears welled in her eyes. She hasn't said a word, just holds my hand and won't let go. She doesn't have to say anything yet, Harris replied gently. She survived. That's enough for today. By nightfall, the cabin was secured. Inside, officers found signs of recent occupation. Blankets, empty water bottles and a backpack filled with coloring books and a cracked flashlight. There were no restraints, no physical evidence of abuse, but the psychological scars were harder to trace. Wallace photographed everything. He tried to make it feel normal, like a game. But it wasn't, Harris said, staring at the child-sized bedroll. It never is. As they exited, Torres glanced back once more, her expression dark. She was lucky we got to her in time. Harris didn't respond. His thoughts lingered on the others, those who hadn't been found, whose trails had gone cold. But this time, one life had been pulled from the dark. And though questions remained, the monster behind it was no longer hiding. Now it was time to make sure he never had the chance again. The hospital room was quiet, except for the faint hum of machines and the gentle ticking of the clock on the wall. Emily sat on the edge of the bed, her knees tucked to her chest, her small fingers clutching the edge of the blanket. Her hair was tangled, her clothes clean but oversized, donated by a nurse. Her eyes, though open, held a guarded stillness as if part of her had not yet returned. Sarah stood by the doorway, unsure if she should move closer. Amanda gave her a gentle nudge. Go to her, she whispered. She's waiting for you. Sarah approached slowly, her hands trembling, her heart thundering in her chest. Hi, sweetheart, she said softly, kneeling beside the bed. It's me. It's Mom. Emily didn't speak. She blinked, tears welling up, and then suddenly reached out and wrapped her arms around her mother's neck. No words, just a crushing, desperate hug that said everything. Sarah broke down, holding her daughter as if she were something fragile and sacred. I've got you, she whispered through tears. You're safe now. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Emily buried her face in her mother's shoulder, her body shaking. Behind them, Amanda wiped her own tears silently. Harris stood at the door, his arms crossed, eyes misted. He didn't enter. This was their moment. Later, in a private meeting room, Harris sat with Sarah and a child psychologist. Emily was asleep, a soft blanket covering her small form in the next room. The psychologist spoke gently. She's in shock, but she's resilient. There's no physical harm, but the emotional impact, it'll take time. What matters is she feels safe again, and she clearly does with you. Sarah nodded, her fingers knotted tightly in her lap. She hasn't told me what happened, not in words, but I know she was scared. I saw it in her eyes. She may talk when she's ready. For now, your presence is her comfort. Don't push, just be with her. Harris leaned forward. Sarah, I need you to know we never stopped. Even when the trail was cold, we didn't give up. She looked at him, her voice trembling. I know, and I'll never forget that. I saw how hard you fought, how everyone fought for her. He gave a small, tired smile. She's home now. That's what matters. Later that evening, Emily was discharged under close care. As Sarah carried her toward the car, neighbors gathered quietly outside the hospital. No cheering, no noise, just candles in hands, heads bowed, silent relief. Emily looked up at them, her fingers still curled tightly around her mother's hand. One small flicker of light reflected in her eyes, and she leaned into Sarah's embrace. Back home, the house was still. Emily hesitated at the front door. Sarah knelt beside her. It's okay. It's your room, your bed, your space. Everything's just how you left it. Emily walked slowly inside, her eyes sweeping over the living room, the couch, her toys still on the shelf. Then she stepped into her bedroom and froze. A stuffed rabbit sat waiting on the pillow. She climbed into bed, pulling the rabbit into her arms. Sarah tucked her in, brushing the hair from her forehead. "I'm right here, baby," she whispered. As Emily drifted off to sleep, the weight of the nightmare slowly eased its grip. In the hallway, Amanda stood with Harris. "Do you think she'll be okay?" "She has a mother who never stopped believing," Harris replied. "That's more powerful than anything he took from her." Outside, the wind rustled the trees, carrying with it a sense of closure, but not finality. Healing had begun, but the road ahead would still be long. Still, tonight Emily was home, and that was enough. The courthouse stood tall against the cold morning sky, its stone facade weathered by time and memory. Inside, a quiet tension hummed in the air. Lawyers adjusted their notes, reporters whispered, and families clutched one another with quiet resolve. For Sarah, the place felt foreign and clinical, a world where rules and processes replaced emotion. But she was here for one reason: to make sure Calvin Reese faced every consequence for what he had done. Harris met her in the lobby, wearing a crisp suit, his badge clipped discreetly at his waist. "You don't have to stay through the whole thing," he said gently. Sarah shook her head. "I need to be here. I want to see it." "I want him to see me." Inside the courtroom, Calvin sat beside his public defender, wrists shackled, hair trimmed, demeanor subdued, but no amount of grooming could erase the shadow that clung to him. His eyes flicked towards Sarah once, then quickly dropped. The judge entered. Proceedings began with the clatter of papers and the reading of charges: kidnapping, unlawful restraint, endangerment of a minor, attempted abduction in 2 other counties. The words echoed through the courtroom like stones dropped in water, rippling through everyone present. The prosecutor laid out the evidence clearly: video footage, the child's drawings, the testimony from gas station clerks, the warehouse scene, the cabin. Most damning of all was Calvin's own confession. The defense tried to argue diminished capacity, citing a history of untreated psychological disorders. "Mr. Reese is not a monster," his attorney said. "He is a deeply disturbed man who never intended harm." But Harris, called as a witness, answered calmly. "He knew how to hide. He planned every move. He manipulated a child into silence. This wasn't a breakdown. It was calculated." When Sarah took the stand, her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. "I woke up every day not knowing if my daughter was alive. I saw her picture on a flyer instead of seeing her at breakfast. No parent should have to go through that." She paused, her eyes fixed on Calvin. "You took her away from her home, her safety. You tried to break her spirit. But she's stronger than you, and she's home. Not because of mercy, but because people fought to bring her back." Calvin stared at the floor, unmoving. Later, the jury deliberated. It didn't take long. Guilty on all counts. The sentence came quickly. 40 years without parole, no appeal. The courtroom didn't erupt. There were no cheers, no applause, just a heavy silence, like a storm finally passed. Outside, Harris and Sarah stood beneath the grey sky. She took a breath that felt deeper than any she'd taken in weeks. "It's done," she said softly. He nodded. "He won't see another child again." Sarah looked over her shoulder at the courthouse. "I thought justice would feel different, bigger. But it's quiet." "Sometimes," Harris said. "Quiet is the best we can hope for." Amanda joined them with 2 coffees, handing one to Sarah. "Emily's home with Mom, drawing. She asked if she could bring you a picture later." Sarah smiled for the first time in days, a real smile. "Tell her I can't wait to see it." Torres arrived moments later, Ranger trotting beside her. The dog sniffed the air, then nudged Sarah's hand gently. "He still remembers her scent," Torres said. "They don't forget the ones they save." Sarah knelt and stroked Ranger's head. "Neither will I." As the group stood together, the courthouse behind them and a long road of healing ahead, there was no need for dramatic words or declarations. Justice had been served. A child was safe. Our community had held its ground, and in that stillness they began to move forward. One breath, one step, one day at a time. Morning light filtered through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow across the countertop where crayons and paper were scattered. Emily sat quietly, focused on her drawing. Her small hand moved with careful strokes. Blue sky, green grass, a stick-figure family holding hands. At the center, a girl with yellow hair smiling. Sarah watched from across the room, tears prickling at her eyes. Not from sadness, but from something she hadn't allowed herself to feel fully until now. Peace. It was fragile and still new, but it was real. Amanda poured coffee and joined her at the table. She slept through the night. Sarah nodded. First time. No nightmares. Just breathing. Like she finally feels safe. She is safe, Amanda said softly. And so are you. They sat in silence, letting the weight of the last days settle. The chaos had ended, but healing had just begun. Later that afternoon, Emily handed Sarah her drawing. "This one's for you," she whispered. Sarah knelt and took it in both hands, her throat tightening. "It's beautiful, honey. Just like you." Emily looked down. "Is he gone?" "Yes, baby," Sarah said gently. "He's gone. He can't hurt anyone ever again." Emily nodded, then added, "I didn't forget you, even when it was dark." Sarah pulled her into a hug, holding her close. "And I never stopped looking, never." Across town at the sheriff's office, Harris stood by the window in his office. The photos had been taken down, the red string on the map removed. All that remained was a single sticky note on the wall. "She's home." Torres entered with Ranger, who wagged his tail once before lying at Harris's feet. "You finally taking a breath?" she asked. "I'm trying," he said, leaning back. "Still feels like something's unfinished." Torres sat across from him. "You did your job. She's safe." "That's not unfinished, that's rare." Harris sighed, then gave a tired smile. "You ever wonder what happens next for kids like her?" "All the time," she said, "but you can't carry every ending. You gave her a new beginning. That has to be enough." He nodded slowly. "I hope she forgets what happened." "She won't," Torres replied, "but she'll survive it." And that matters more. In the weeks that followed, Maplewood returned to something close to normal. The yellow ribbons came down, the search flyers were removed. But in every window where Emily's picture once hung, someone now placed a candle, not for mourning, but for resilience. At school, Emily returned gradually. Short days at first, a quiet desk by the window. Her classmates were gentle, their whispers respectful. No one asked what happened. They just made space for her to smile again when she was ready. One day during recess, she ran, really ran, across the playground, her laughter catching the wind like a forgotten song. And for those who saw it, it felt like a promise that life could bloom again even after the worst storms. For Sarah, the world had changed forever. Fear didn't vanish overnight, but neither did strength. She began volunteering at the community center, speaking to other parents, raising awareness about child safety. Her pain became purpose, and for Harris, the case became a marker. Not a burden, but a reminder of why he still wore the badge. When other cases came, he faced them with new fire, remembering Emily, how she was found, how she held on, how she came home. To everyone who followed this journey, thank you for staying until the end. Stories like Emily's remind us that behind every headline is a family, a fight, and a flicker of hope that refuses to go out. If you felt moved by this story, please subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing real human stories that matter. And if you want to keep watching, click on the next video appearing now. Another story of survival, resilience, and the people who never give up. Because sometimes the smallest voices have the strongest echoes.